Okay, and Zainab says hello. Hi Zainab, how are you? All right, guys, we're gonna get started for the sake of time, and more people will join along the way, that's fine. We're gonna spend about 30 minutes of really brief presentation about job application strategies. You're all about to graduate in the next month or two, maybe 3 months for some of you, which is a very exciting time. But maybe a little bit overwhelming as well. And so that's the purpose of our session today. So we're going to keep it to a brief 30 minutes, and then we'll take about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for a discussion and Q&A session. So my name is Alexandra. I'm a senior program officer at AGFE. You might have seen me on Mighty Networks or at some other events. And I also work with our scholars at AUS here at the United Arab Emirates and with some remote scholars overseas in the US and Canada. So I'm a university coordinator and I also work at the foundation on the scholarship program. So to get started, I'm just going to share my screen. All right, and to kick it off, I just need to fix this. Here we go. To kick it off, we are going to start the session today, Job Application Strategies for Upcoming Graduates, with a couple fun little polls. So this is a website called Slido. You can either go to the web address in the corner here, slido.com, or if you have your phone open, you can just use the QR code and it will bring you straight to
in
progress. Welcome, and if you can just mute yourself, I think that will be helpful. So yeah, we are checking out who is in the room today. Which university are you graduating from this semester? All right, so far we have a pretty even breakdown. ASU, which would be our open learning scholars. American University of Sharjah, we have some scholars from Morocco. Very nice. Okay, and a couple of AUB, some coach representatives, some scholars from Jordan, awesome. And I'm just trying to scroll down because we have some more universities, but I seem to have lost my mouse. There it is. Okay, so it looks like OLS scholars for the win. Let's just take 10 more seconds to lock in your university and then we'll move on to the next poll. Very nice. All right, so we've got OLS scholars from Morocco, from Sharjah, from Beirut, Istanbul at Koç University, and PSUT in Jordan. Very nice. Welcome, everybody. All right, second poll before we get started. Have you applied to any jobs yet? So just use the QR code again. It's a new QR code. All right, and it looks like the scale is tipped a little bit toward some job applications have been submitted. A few people haven't yet. That's okay. That's the purpose of our session today, is to kind of gauge where you should be by this time of the year. And cool, we're going to move on to the first part of our presentation. So we are going to cover 4 main areas of job application strategies today. The first thing is going to be our job application timeline. So where should you be at this point in your semester based on when your graduation date is, and what are some of the steps that you need to take along the way in chronological order. And then we're going to move on to sources for finding job postings. I am sure most of you are familiar with the standard job search website, so we're going to cover those and then maybe a few more you haven't heard of. We're going to discuss a couple of tools to track your job applications, which maybe you haven't thought of before and is a central part of every person's, or should be a central part of every person's job application strategy, tracking. And then we'll wrap it up with some communication etiquette for job applications, both over email, over the phone, over video, calls, etc. So for your job application timeline, I cannot emphasize enough, it is never too early to start. This timeline is based loosely off if your last semester, your graduating semester, started sometime around the new year, sometime around January. So if that's the case, I'd like to ask you before I give you the answer, anyone feel free to unmute yourself. What do you think the first step in your job application timeline should be? What's the first thing you should start with when you're beginning to plan for job applications as you graduate? Or you can chat it. Zainab says, updating your resume. Yes, Zainab, excellent. Resume, CV, LinkedIn, for sure. You guys have hit the nail on the head. So the first thing you want to do is update your CV, your cover letter, or your LinkedIn profile. So like your written materials. And so I'm hoping that everybody in the room today has already started that. If you haven't, that should be the first thing that you finish the call and start on, like this evening directly. If you haven't updated your CV or your cover letter or started your cover letter template, when you close the call today, that is the first thing that you want to do. Next up, any guesses what the second thing on your timeline might be? You guys can unmute yourselves as well, if it's easier than chatting. After you update that CV, what are you going to do? Start looking for opportunities? Yeah, I mean, definitely dive right in. Job search, sure. I would say before you even do that, visit your university career center. Everybody should have at least a counselor or a career center or some office on campus or remotely that you can contact that will offer you some support in your job search, whether it be connecting you with a university job board, like an online website where the university posts opportunities, or maybe even checking your CV, maybe discussing any questions you might have as an upcoming graduate. Has anyone visited their career center yet? Sammy has visited. Mohammed, not yet. Sammy says it was valuable. Mufak visited the career center. So yeah, if you haven't done that yet, please check out your university career center. If you don't know what it is, ask your university coordinator, your AGFE university coordinator, or your success coach if you're an OLS scholar. Because Arizona State University has a career center and all of our partner universities have a career center, and it's an awesome resource to rely on. So number 2, after you start your CV, visit the career center. Next up, we have create an account on the university job board. So after you visit the career center, you should be aware of your university job board. This is a great resource to start with for job search because the companies on there have a relationship with your university. So they're going to recognize your university on your CV. and know that you're coming from a place that they are interested in hiring from. Does anybody not know what or has never heard of a university job board before?
No, in my case, I've never heard about it.
Okay. And she's asking, is Handshake the ASU job board? Yes. Handshake for OLS scholars. AUS, it's Simplicity. Yep. There's different platforms with different names. So again, ASU is called Handshake. AUS is called Simplicity. Your university might use one of those, or it might be something different, but it's basically just a website that you use your university email to log into, and you can search different job opportunities. So again, if you have never seen this or heard of this, make sure you go to your career center on campus or schedule a remote meeting and get logged into that, because it's much more direct access than like Indeed.com or LinkedIn posts. You have a personal university connection with these companies.
May I ask you something about that?
Yeah.
Okay, regarding Handshake for ASU, I think it is for US jobs mainly. So as an online student, I think it would be hard to apply through that platform. What do you think?
You know what? I think that you should check with your success coach at ASU. I don't disagree with you. I'm sure it's very US centric. But you can ask if there's a way to search by country. There should be a way to search by country on Handshake.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah, there
I
is a way.
check that.
By country.
There is a way. Okay. But yeah, you're right. It is going to be pretty focused on the US. So we're going to talk about other resources as well that are more regional.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and Hala wants to know, will we still have access to our ASU emails after graduating? You should. I'm not a representative of ASU, so I can't answer that 100%, but 99% of universities let you keep your university email. They'll either transfer you to something called an alumni account where all of your uni emails will be forwarded, or you'll just keep the same address and logins. Like I graduated 11 years ago and I still have access to my undergrad university account. Okay, next up we have hello. Set a weekly job application goal for yourself. What does this mean? You want to be applying every week. You want to set aside 1 hour minimum, I would say, every week to apply exclusively for job opportunities you're interested in after graduation. What would that goal look like if you take a guess? Like how many applications would you say is reasonable per week? Angie says 7, Zainab says 10. Yeah, I would say 5 to 10 per week. In a perfect world, you would apply to 5 to 10 per week starting at the beginning of the semester, so that you have maybe, 12 to 16 to 20 weeks of job applications. Imagine that we're all living in a perfect world and we started months ago. Rahab says quality matters the number. That's partially true, yes. But imagine that you had started at the beginning of your semester and you're applying to 5 applications per week. Who can do really quick math and tell me how many total job applications you would have submitted by the end of the semester? Okay, Mohammed says about 30. Yeah, based on how long your semester is. So I would say if you're just starting now, you might want to up your weekly goal a bit. Rahab says quality matters more than number. That is definitely true. And we can talk about the different types of jobs that you're applying to, the different types of postings, but it is also a numbers game. Meaning, the more applications you submit, the higher your chance of a callback. It's just a pure numbers game. I would say that you want to have submitted like 50 applications when all is said and done, because the reality is most of your applications are going to be through an online system. It's very competitive. It's hard to stand out. Obviously, we're talking about strategy to make you stand out a bit. That's the purpose of the session today. But the more you apply to, the greater your chances of a callback, as well as some other strategies that we'll discuss. But you cannot apply to too many jobs. So I would say everyone should aim for at least, you know, close to 50 job applications when you're a graduating student. How do you guys feel about that? Is that more than you expected? Is that about what you were expecting? Anyone completely shocked by this number? Okay, sounds on target for Zainab. Cool. So moving on, the next thing that we want to cover is creating a tracking system. What does that mean?
Okay. May I ask you something about the last point, which is number of applications per week?
Yeah.
Do you think how much time would it take, or the perfect time, if you can say, would it take to apply for a job, for a vacancy?
Yeah, I mean, there's different types of job applications. So you have this thing on LinkedIn called auto apply, which you guys might have seen, and that takes very little time. But like Rahab mentioned, it's not a high quality application because it's an automatic application that submits your LinkedIn profile, and maybe you'll attach a resume, but there's no like personalized element to it. That can be maybe 5 or 10 minutes. If you're applying to a job posting over email or over an online system that requires a cover letter, then you're going to want to spend, you know, 30 minutes on that application.
So 30 minutes is a good number, is a good duration.
Yes, if for the more like customized ones. So when you're creating your weekly goal, you want to have a mix of the auto apply and the more personalized cover letter options.
Oh, okay, I got your point.
But yeah, it's very important to set aside time every week. So you might even just create an event in your calendar that auto repeats every Friday at 10 a.m. and just give yourself like, let's say 2 hours to start and see what you can achieve in those 2 hours. Like any goal, it's okay if you don't achieve your full goal every time, but you just want to set a standard for yourself and try to reach that every week. What's important is that you're spending time every week.
Okay, thanks for sharing that.
Yes, that's my advice there. So we're now talking about a tracking system. So let's say that you get into the habit of applying to 5 applications per week, maybe 10. What do I mean when I say create a tracking system?
Like something to keep track of the responses to every application I submit, and keep the application that I submit to companies.
Yeah, exactly. And Sammy even suggested an Excel with all the responses. So that's right on the money. So if you have a tracking system, A, you're going to see if you're meeting your weekly goal. And B, are you going to be able to maximize your strategy, which is partially what Mufak just mentioned, which is like your responses from the jobs and also how to follow up, which is a key component, which is the next thing on the timeline. Create a follow-up schedule. So I cannot emphasize this enough. If you are only applying to jobs and you are not sending a follow-up email, if you have the option of like an HR email address, then you are not doing everything that you should. to maximize your responses. If you are following up, you need to follow up both for your application and after your interview, if you are lucky enough to get an interview. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I will just share a quick anecdote. The last job I applied to, I felt I was very qualified. This was before AGFE. I'm not like letting you in on AGFE secrets, but before AGFE, I felt that I was very qualified for the position, and I was feeling pretty confident that I would get a call back. And a month passed and I heard nothing. I didn't even get like a confirmation that my application was received. I had an auto response. Thank you for your blah, blah, blah. We'll get back to you. Nobody ever reached out to me. So I just sent a follow-up email reiterating my really strong interest in the role. It wasn't a new cover letter. It wasn't like a brand new application, just 1 or 2 sentences. I'm very interested. I just wanted to confirm you received my materials. Hope to hear back from you soon. And I got a call literally the next day. I went in for an interview at the end of that week, and they offered me the job on the spot after my interview. So like, imagine if I had never sent that follow-up email and just assumed they didn't like me, then I would never have had that job. I worked there for 3 years. I got 2 promotions. Like, it was a very good experience. And a simple email led me down that path. So it's so important that you follow up. Okay, and you want to follow up after 2 to 4 weeks of every application. And the tracking tools that we're going to look at are going to help you keep that organized. And then the last thing is, even if you don't get an interview call back yet, start practicing, start doing some mock interviews. Even if you get a call back from a job that you're not super interested in, you can always go to that interview and use it as like a practice interview. The more you practice, the stronger your interviews are going to be. Everyone gets nervous for interviews, but you want to have like auto responses ready, kind of to like roll off without thinking too much, and that will take away your nerves and help you perform better. So practice interviews. All right, any questions about the timeline before we move on to the next section?
I have a question.
Yes.
Like, what if you have like your very first choice, like your like dream position, and then you've applied to others, and those others have like they've answered you before your dream position, and they have some sort of like immediate need. So how do you deal with this?
Like how to request an extension on giving them an answer?
Yes.
That is a great question. I kind of
or like how ethical would it be to, you know, start the job, and then once I get the response from like the dream position, I just go.
Oh, like maybe they want you to start the same week and you haven't heard back from your dream job yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables because sometimes there's contracts and commitments involved that you need to be aware of. I'm actually gonna have you hold on to that question until our 3rd session in the series, which we're running in 2 weeks. Did you sign up for that session? Because that's very related to that topic. It's called negotiating offers. So yeah, if anybody wants to know the answer to that question, please sign up for the 3rd series, the 3rd session in the series. And we'll definitely address that issue. Okay, and then Rania wants to know if after having a call saying you're selected for the position and then no offer was sent, shall I send an email again? Yes, definitely. I think they're probably just a little bit busy and your position got lost in the shuffle, which is like what happened to me in that story I just told. They just like had lost my CV because they had so many applicants. So definitely follow up, but I would say with caution, because maybe if they're that disorganized, it may not be a place that you want to work. Like if they're saying that you're selected and then a month passes and nothing happens, that's not a good sign. So send a follow-up, but maybe explore like if this is a office culture that you want to be a part of. Okay, so next we have Steve.
I
Yeah.
also have like another question, if possible.
Yeah.
Like about like what columns should we put in the tracking system?
Yes, we're going to cover that in the next slide. Excellent question. Okay, and Ronnie says thank you. Cool. So CV and cover letter. I'm going to spend 2 seconds on this because we have a lot of resources available to you guys that you can read in your own time. Where can you find a CV template and a cover letter guide? Who knows, as an AGFE scholar, where you can find these materials?
Actually, I am recently using a website called Resume.io. It's
Okay.
really great and it's really useful.
Okay, great. If you want to send that in the chat, that would be nice.
For
Rehan
me,
said young thinkers, yeah.
I use the career coaching service at the ASU, and I had like one-to-one meeting on how to develop, improve the CV and cover letter, and it really worked.
Okay, awesome. I'm really happy to hear that. So yeah, your university will definitely have resources for you as well, but as a general source, all AGFE scholars have access to a Google Drive that we created for you guys, and the link is in the weekly newsletter that you all receive. So if you have not opened the Google Drive, which is in the weekly newsletter, please, please, please look there. There is a perfect CV template that everybody can use. There is a really easy to use cover letter guide. And there's a lot of other resources in there that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But if you haven't looked, you need to look at the Google Drive because it's there to answer all of these questions that you have. Yeah, Sammy says you can Google it and take from multiple websites. You can, but like we did the work for you. It's already in the Google Drive. So if you're feeling lazy, just use the sources that we've created for you already. Does anybody not know what the weekly newsletter is? Angie wants the Google Drive link. It is actually linked later in the slideshow, and I'm going to send this to everybody. But you can also go into your weekly newsletter that you receive from AGFE, and it's the first link at the top of the newsletter every week. Okay, and if you're not reading the newsletter, you definitely need to start reading the newsletter because you're graduating soon and there's lots of goodies in there for you, which we'll talk about. Okay, so that's cover letters and templates in the AGFE Google Drive. And the next quick bit about CVs and cover letters. Who should check your CV? Anyone have an idea?
Mock interviews, maybe?
Say again?
Mock interviews?
Mock interviews, but who is checking it? Who is the person checking it? Career advisor, yes. Career service, yes. Always your first support for the CV should be your career counselor or career advisor at your university. You can also show it to professors, you can show it to friends, you can show it to family, but your first resource should be your career center counselor. Okay, what is the biggest CV mistake? If you had to choose one, what is the one thing that is like a deal breaker for an employer? Not tailoring it. I would say that is permissible, like you can get away with an untailored CV. But what is like one mistake? Yeah, grammar or a typo. Yeah, exactly. If you have a typo on your CV, and like I have looked at applicants and just thrown them away if they have a really bad typo, because that speaks to your attention to detail, it speaks to your writing ability, it speaks to how much time you put into your work. It just says a lot about you. So triple check your CV, show it to a career center counselor, and then you can always show it to 1 or 2 or 3 other people. And then finally, how many different cover letters should you have? Speaking of Rahab's comment about not tailoring it.
It depends on the position that we are applying for.
Yeah, so I would say you should create a template for your cover letter that you can draw upon. And then when you start a new application, just replace certain keywords to customize your cover letter. So that way you're not reinventing the wheel or writing a new one from scratch every time, but you are still customizing it to the job. So you might have the company name and the position that you replace. I mean, for sure you will replace those words, but then you might replace some examples of your work related to that job, but the filler sentences can stay the same. Okay, moving on. Sources for job postings. So we have some pretty typical ones. We talked about the university job board. That should be your first resource. We also have indeed.com, which is pretty expansive for the region. So everybody should find some opportunities on this website based on where you're located. Of course, there's LinkedIn. I know we have master's and bachelor students here today, but does everybody know how to search for jobs on LinkedIn by experience? Like by number of years of experience? That's a filter that you can set on LinkedIn. So if you aren't doing that, when you're in your job search and you're filtering for location and industry and company, you also can filter the years of experience, and you can even create like an alert for the experience level that applies to you. There's also a website called monster.com, and I'm just going to show you really quickly. Monster.com. So this is monstergulf.com, and you can search exclusively for fresher jobs, meaning 0 to 2 years of experience. So I'm looking in Dubai because of my IP address, but they also have Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, Saudi, and you can filter for fresher jobs with 0 to 2 years experience, 1 to 3 years, which I think is probably like the biggest frustration for some of you, is finding jobs with open to recent grads. So this is a good resource for that. All right, we also have in the GCC, there's a website called Ojo Community, and there's another website called olive.com. But again, that's for Gulf states only. If you are not based in the Gulf, there are always regional job boards, and the best person to ask is your career center advisor or your university coordinator, because they'll know region-specific job boards for you. All right, we also have AGFE Google Drive. So it's linked here in the PowerPoint. And so I'm just going to show you, if you haven't checked this out yet, really quickly, we have a whole section called Private Sector Database. And there's 2 databases here. There's a list of graduate training programs, which are corporate training programs for fresh grads, either 6 or 12 months long. And does anybody know what a graduate training program is? Just unmute yourself and tell me.
Isn't like the residency program internships like that lasts for a year or something?
Yeah, it's a little bit more robust than an internship. It lasts a year. It's paid a very good salary usually, and it's a bit generalist. So if you were to apply to, let's say like Dannon, because you're interested in like fast moving products or the healthcare industry or foodstuffs or something like that, you would learn a couple of different departments inside of Dannon over the course of the year. You would get a like very livable salary, and then you often are in a pipeline to employment with the company. So if you're open to a more like generalist first job and you just have like a certain goal for joining a corporation, this is an awesome backup to applying to individual jobs. So we have a database here of graduate training programs. And then we also have a list of companies by industry and by country. So you can download this into an Excel and you can filter by your country or your sector, and you can Google the company names if you're feeling like you're hitting a wall with LinkedIn or Indeed.com and you want to look for specific companies. Mahmoud said the links are broken. Yeah, we're working on updating it, but if the link isn't working, you can just Google the company name and graduate training program, because a lot of them have like refurbished their websites in the past 2 years. So it's more of like a source of information than the link in some cases. But yes, thank you for mentioning that, Mahmoud. We are updating it. Okay, so 2 resources in the Google Drive. It's the Career Readiness Toolkit, Essential Resources, Private Sector Database. Okay. We also have referrals from professors. If you have not asked a professor if they know of any job openings that might suit you, definitely do that. Go to their office hours. If you are a TA or a research assistant, ask a professor if they have any recommendations. This is a great way to get your foot in the door with a personal connection. Same goes for previous internship employers. If you worked somewhere last summer and you haven't reached out to that employer yet, please do so and see if they have any job openings for you. You've already like started to build that professional relationship. So definitely take advantage of that. And then we have the AGFE weekly rundown, which is mostly internships right now. But I would say if you're graduating and you haven't found a full-time job yet, you should still be applying to summer internships just to at least like, you know, have some more experience building before you find that full-time position. A lot of people will work in a 3 or 6 month internship and still apply for a permanent position on the side. You shouldn't expect to necessarily have like your dream job the day of graduation. It's an ongoing process. So if you see an internship in the weekly rundown that you're qualified for, definitely apply. And it can turn into a long-term position as well. So let's not discount those opportunities.
Also, I have something to add, if you don't mind. There are also 2 applications that are free and help you get and look for jobs or internships in the MENA region. And these applications are Gulf Talent and the Glassdoor, if you don't know them.
Yeah, Gulf Talent is definitely a great one if you're in the UAE or Saudi. I wanted to kind of keep
yes,
the like
you can filter by your region, your country, because it's for most likely the MENA region, all the MENA region.
Yeah, Gulf Talent is another great one. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so our third to last topic is tools to track your job applications. So of course you can create your own Microsoft Excel tracker. And here's just a recommendation for what your categories would be: company, position, date, link. if you got a response or not, when did you send the follow-up, did you get an interview, and did you follow up with a thank you after the interview. Very simple, very straightforward. If you are somebody who likes more automated apps, there's this platform called Hunter. It's really, really nice. It's pretty intuitive and simple to use. So they have this board. This is your board. It's like your dashboard when you create an account. And what you can do is you can have a wish list of jobs if you're feeling like you don't want to delve into the actual applications yet. I would caution you to skip this because it's March and you guys want to be a little bit more advanced in your application timeline. And it's very easy from firsthand experience, I can tell you, to just like search and search and search and add a list of jobs you want to apply to and never actually submit the application. This is a dangerous trap that I think you should avoid, especially given that it's April next week. So skip the wish list for now. But for jobs that you've applied to, if you want to create a new entry, you will just enter the company, the job title, whether you've applied or had the interview already, save the job, and then you'll have the link, the location, the description. You can or cannot enter that. You don't have to. I don't think it's really necessary. But the important thing is to have your activities filled out. So this is a great way to automate your reminders for your follow-up and your thank you note. So every time you want to add an activity, you can choose one of these categories and either mark as created or set it up for a future date, and it will give you a reminder. And then when you go back to your dashboard, you can see all of the actions that you have to take. So I won't go into it too much deeper. I'm not going to give you like a full demo of the platform. You can play around with it. It's very easy to use, but this is a great way to automate if you don't want to just use an Excel sheet. Okay, and again, it's called Hunter, and it's linked in the presentation, which you'll all receive over email. Okay, and finally, we're going to move on to communication etiquette for job applications. So what would you say is like a major email etiquette mistake that people make? Mohammed says dress casually. Yes, but Mohammed, for email, if you're sending an email, if you're communicating over email, what is a mistake that people make? Sure, the structure of the email or the vocabulary. Yeah, maybe like your structure is too casual. Maybe you forgot to say, "Dear Mr. Mohammed." Zainab said grammar mistakes. Definitely, you guys should all have autocorrect in your email. If you don't have that set up your autocorrect. Rashad said no formal email. Yeah, if you're too casual, these are definitely some etiquette mistakes. Where can you find a guide on email etiquette? Oh yeah, forgetting to attach the resume, definitely, Zainab. If you wanted to check a guide on proper email etiquette, on proper email practices in a professional setting, where do you think, as an AGFE scholar,
On the
you
drive.
can find that? Yes, on the Google Drive, we have an email etiquette guide. And I'm just going to show you a quick sample of that, but I'll let you check it out yourself in your own time. Before I show you the sample, if you don't have the unsend or the message recall option on your email, please activate that. This is a lifesaver. If you have sent the email and you think you forgot to attach the resume, or you forgot to put the person's name correctly, or you feel like you spaced out for a second and maybe made a typo, you can unsend that email before they look at it, and it will save your life. It is such a good hack for any email server. Gmail has it, Microsoft Outlook has it, Hotmail has it. So definitely activate that. Rashad knows from firsthand experience, yes. All right, so here's some major email etiquette mistakes. We already talked about that. I'm gonna skip for the sake of time. Oh, where is my little sample? Huh, I guess my PowerPoint didn't update. Okay, let me show you our little sample of the email guide. So in the Google Drive, you have email etiquette, tips for writing a professional email that you should all check out. And if you're feeling lazy, this is a really simple graphic. When in doubt, just use this graphic. You always need a subject line. You always need a greeting with the person's last name, Mr. or Ms. You need to keep it short. You should never use emoticons unless this is somebody that you have a close working relationship with in a professional setting. Maybe it's a colleague that you've known for a couple of years, but if you are applying to a job, you should not have any sort of emoji, emoticons, not even the little like colon with the parenthesis, like no smiley faces. And then your fonts should be very simple. So like Times New Roman, Helvetica, Calibri, and keep it in the color black. Okay, if you follow these 6 things, you'll be fine. Everything else is forgivable. All right, so we're just gonna skip the last slide because we only have 10 minutes left, but I just wanna go over some phone and video etiquette mistakes. So if you are having a phone interview or a video interview, you want to be in a quiet place, you want to speak clearly, you want to be prepared for the discussion as though you're going in person to the office. And if it's a video, you want to have a very plain background and make sure that your body is from the shoulders up. If you follow these things, you'll be okay. That's a very, very basic guide. This isn't an interview preparation webinar, so we're not going to get into the details. You can go onto the Google Drive to look for tips about that. But these are just some basic things that I want everyone to keep in mind when you're communicating with employers. Okay. So yeah, that is it for our session today. I want to use the last few minutes for any questions that you guys didn't get a chance to ask.
I have a question.
Sure.
So apart like from the like opportunities in the like weekly rundown or the drive, can AGFE help us find jobs in the UAE?
So what we're doing right now, you might have seen in the weekly rundown, is we're collecting CVs from you guys, and we're creating a CV book that we're going to share with some corporate partners that we have, and they will have the option to reach out to anybody from that CV book that they might be interested in. But for now, apart from the opportunities in the weekly rundown. We can't like personally suggest positions to you if you reach out to us. We are actively developing more and more relationships with corporations in the region. So your number one resource to access that is the weekly rundown.
I'm asking because like you could like apply to jobs like directly from the internet, but then there's always this question of, are you authorized to work in this territory, blah, blah, blah. It's usually no. And I guess they filter
Oh, I see. Like
people
you mean
based on this.
if you're applying from
Yeah, because the
outside
main
state.
problem is the visa, basically.
Right. Yeah, so the thing is, that is like a labor law that is at the governmental level in the UAE. So if you're applying from outside of the UAE, your only connection to your visa in the UAE is the employer who is your sponsor. Is that what your question is about sponsorship?
Yeah.
Yeah, so unfortunately, like we are a nonprofit foundation and we can't act as a sponsor because that would mean that we're employing you with a visa at our foundation. So I know the like terminology is a bit confusing when you see the word sponsor, but to arrive in the UAE, you have to have an employer or a relative as your sponsor legally to get a visa. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry,
Yes, it does.
it's not a helpful answer, but that's just the government policy here. But the good news is the foundation is based in the UAE. And so most of our connections and like the jobs and internships that we're sharing are in the UAE. So if you see a remote position, you should apply to that because that can open doors to future employment in the UAE.
Okay.
Is there a date that you will share, by which you will share the CV book you mentioned before with the corporations?
Say that again.
Is there a specific date by which you will share the CV book with the corporations?
A specific date?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say in the next 2 weeks or so, we'll have it ready.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're just organizing it by major/industry right now so that we're not like bombarding corporates with CVs that they're not interested in. But yeah, in the next couple of weeks for sure, it will go out to the contacts that we have. Paula says most employers don't want to sponsor a visa. I mean, in the UAE, it's a little bit different. They are like slightly more open to visa sponsorship just because the country is 90% expatriate, meaning only 10% are local Emirati people. So it is much more common to get a visa sponsorship in the UAE. The larger the corporation, the more likely they are going to offer sponsorship with the employment package. So if you're really, really interested in moving to the UAE for a job, you should be targeting large corporations because they have the resources and they're very used to bringing people from abroad. And someone said, will you only contact corporates or NGOs as well? I mean, the majority of our majors that we sponsor for you guys at the universities are like STEM and industries of like developing industries of the future. So we tend to focus on corporates. If you specifically are looking for an NGO career, I would recommend that you join the mentorship program and you can get matched with somebody who works in the NGO industry. But there's really just like a handful, maybe 3 or so scholars who are interested in NGOs. So that would be like a more personalized approach. I don't think we're going to have a CV book for NGO industry.
I have a question regarding the resumes, the series book. How can you please just filtered regarding the industry if we don't mention it in the CV.
So if you saw the weekly rundown request, it asks you to send the email with your CV to scholarcareers@alghurairfoundation.org. And in the subject line, we asked you to put your major.
But for my case, for example, my major is engineering, but I'm targeting supply chain management. So
is your
different.
major industrial engineering?
It's engineering and management science, yes.
Engineering management. Yeah, so we would just categorize it as engineering management, and a big part of engineering management is supply chain. Like that's part of the umbrella. So, you know, as long as you're not straying 180 degrees from your major, then you're going to be categorized in the right industry.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, Sammy, by the way, you're messaging me directly. I don't think the group can see you, but Sammy said the mentorship program is very useful. Highly recommend it. That is so nice to hear. The next cycle, if you guys missed the sign up, is going to be August. This cycle is ending July. The next sign up will be August. So please join. You can join as an alumni. So if you haven't done that before, definitely keep an eye out for the next cycle in August.
Hello, can I ask a question about the resumes?
Yes, of course.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. I found it very helpful and informative. And I want to ask, do you think that adding a lot of things to the resume or the CV would be counterintuitive and counterproductive in specific cases?
Yeah, so definitely check out the template we have in the Google Drive. You'll notice that it's one page. I would say if you are under 5 years of experience as a working professional, then you shouldn't have a CV longer than one page. So that means that you need to filter the details you're adding. If you have stuff on there from high school or awards that you won in university that aren't relevant anymore, definitely cut that down so that you can fit one page, because I don't know very many HR managers who are going to spend their time flipping through multiple pages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Zainab says, do you think we should add or remove the job objective? Yeah, I think like if you're sending a cover letter, you don't need the objective. Okay, here's the caveat. In my opinion, in my professional opinion, I'm not a career counselor, but from my experience working for 12 years, if you think that your CV doesn't really reflect a connection to the job that you're applying to, and you feel like you need to emphasize your interest in this position, even though your experience is a little bit non-traditional, then keep the objective. If your objective is super obvious and you're like a civil engineer and all your experience is civil engineering and you're applying to a civil engineering job, don't put the objective. It's very repetitive and redundant. Does that make this, is that clear? Okay, and then Zainab said, I was thinking to keep it to specify that I want a job and not an internship. I mean, I don't think you should specify that in your CV. I think you should be open to both and apply to both. And if you really, really, really don't want an internship, then don't apply to any internships. But I think everyone should be applying to internships at the same time. It's just like a reality. A lot of people have to work internships after graduating before getting a full-time position. I worked an internship for 6 months. I had a job for a year after my bachelor's degree, like a full-time paid position. That was a 1-year contract. And then I had to go back to an internship for 6 months before I found my next position. I worked in a restaurant as a waitress in the evenings, and I worked in an internship during the day. So that experience really like put me on the path that I wanted to go down, but I just had to make ends meet with a different job at the same time for a short period of time. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up. Is there 1 or 2 more questions before we sign off? Great, so I'm gonna send the PowerPoint to everybody. And if you haven't started your CV, when you hang up right now, do that. And if you haven't looked at the Google Drive, please check it out. Mahar just sent the link in the chat, but it's also going to be linked in the PowerPoint that I'm sending. Great. Well, thank you for joining us. Make sure you sign up for session 2 and session 3. We're going to keep it in the weekly rundown, the weekly newsletter, if you haven't seen it. And I hope that we will see you at our next session. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.